I'm Prema Namashwa. I'm working as a technical manager at Verifone. Today we are going to talk about the streamlining API management with API Ops and decK. And also we have did a small initiative with the decK MCP AI chatbot. I'll talk in detail about that as well. So before I get into the topic directly, can I know who are all working with Kong declarative configurations? Can you please raise your hands? Yeah, thanks. So is there any operations team here? DevOps? No, that's fine. Nowadays, they are removing all the jobs, right? Only developers is doing end-to-end. So, yeah. Hello. Yeah, thanks. So let's see about that. It's a purely technical presentation, so let's get into the topic here. So, okay, first, let me talk about Verifone's journey with Kong. We have leveraged Kong from its early days, like 2019, we started leveraging Kong as an API gateway. So when we started with Kong, how do we configure an API? An API configuration is not very well versed as of now. Earlier, there was only curl commands which was given for an API configuration. So we had a lot of problems with the curl command configuration. Then we moved into a declarative way of configuration. After moving to the declarative configurations as well, we faced some challenges, and then we moved to the spec-first approach. And finally, with the spec-first approach, we are good, well and good. But we have also explored the agentic AI era, so using the MCP server. We'll talk about that and how it is going to help us. So first, when we started with the API configurations with the curl commands, so as you all know, if I want to register one API for one microservice, I have to do all these steps. I have to configure a service, configure a route, configure plugins, configure consumers. So for one API, we have to do 7 API calls. So because Kong as an API gateway has a lot of features, to use each feature, we have to configure them via APIs. So that's fine, but what is the problem with that? Currently, if I have to configure all these APIs using curl commands, what will be my problem statement? If I have to roll back a configuration, it's not so easy because curl commands doesn't have, if I want to roll back this configuration, for an example, plugins. Plugins is not, we cannot roll back the plugins using the name of the plugin, right? We need an UUID. So UUID is different for every environment. So in that case, if I want to prepare a rollback script, it has to be separate rollback scripts for a dev, staging, prod. So it is a very tedious activity we have to follow. And then failure points were not at all easy. Meaning, so if I'm doing some configuration using the curl commands, and if my mistake, I'm overriding some configurations, I'll not get to know. Because it just posts or patches, and it overrides my API definitions, and I'll come to know only after user raises this issue. This becomes so serious for us, and we were not able to achieve resilience easily. If there is a failure to roll back, if there is a long list of scripts, it has to run to roll back the complete scripts. All those things, we talked to the Kong team, and they gave us a option with the declarative configuration. As you can see, as an example, I've given a declarative configuration file here. So if I want to configure a service, route, upstreams, targets, everything, we configure in a single file, and a single command is used to sync it to the Kong. What is the advantage of this? We also have tags here, right? So the tags is giving versioning for us. If there is an example service, and it can be named with a tag called 1.0.0. And if there is a new API coming to that service, I can name it 1.0.1, and I can roll back that particular configuration only, leaving the existing one as it is. And then diff is a very good option which is provided that I'll be able to fail fast with the diff. How? If I do a check with the decK diff of this configuration, if I'm overriding or updating any configuration, this is going to give me a clear picture what is created, what is updated, and what is going to be deleted. So all these things has reduced a lot of challenges for us. So we are able to achieve resiliency. How? We are able to use a tag rollback. decK reset with a tag name, you are able to quickly roll back to your previous configuration. Fail fast. Before even syncing the configuration, you are doing a diff and checking. Version control using tags. You are able to version it and only roll back that particular version. And bootstrapping. So bootstrapping is another important feature for decK. Assume I have an API gateway configuration and I want to bring up a new instance of Kong. I can take a dump of the existing configuration and I can just sync it back to the new Kong environment. So within minutes, I'm able to bring up my new Kong environment using the decK. So all were going good. So what went wrong? Why we were going to the Spec-First approach? Let's talk that. So this is a template heavy configuration. As I was showing you, we have to prepare a service, route, upstreams. So you have to remember all those things and do it manually. And that requires a lot of effort and understanding as well. So if there is a new member coming to joining the team, he has to be aware of the API gateway, he has to be aware of the decK tooling, and he has to be aware of the templates. So much of learning curve was there. So how do we avoid that? And how do we make the team autonomous? Like if I have a standard OpenAPI specification, and if I give that to the Kong, Kong should do whatever it requires. Is there a way? Yes. So this is where the Spec-First approach using the declarative configurations was introduced by Kong. So when we are able to give the OpenAPI specifications, be it there are 200 APIs. For an example, a microservice is having 100 APIs or 200 APIs. Everything comes into a single spec. So if you upload that spec to the decK CLI, it is able to convert it either to a decK configuration or a Kong ingress controller configuration, which is ingress rules. So one API specification can cater to multiple vendor agnostic solutions. Suppose if we want to use a Kong ingress controller with an ingress rule, I don't need to write an ingress rule here. My OpenAPI spec to Kong will do this magic. How is it doing? This is the command. If I give an OpenAPI spec and decK has a command called OpenAPI-to-Kong, I have to just give an input of my spec and then it will give me an output with the decK configuration and I can sync it. Is that all done here? No. There are few more steps we need to do here. What is that? So first of all, how is the OpenAPI specification is converted into the Kong configurations? I have mentioned here. So Kong is taking the title field of the OpenAPI specification and naming all the entities. So if the title is sample API, the entities will be named as sample API service, sample API root, sample API upstreams. And then this is the spec file search structure. Servers is there. These servers are taken as upstreams and targets in Kong. And there is a path field here, and that path field is taken as a route path in Kong. So now we saw that OpenAPI specifications, how Kong is able to convert it into the Kong entities. Is that alone enough? No. Kong is able to do a default conversion. Like if you give an OpenAPI spec, Kong is able to default to apply all the default configurations and convert it into a Kong configurations. But what we need more. Like Kong has an upstream health check configurations, service has a connect timeout, read timeout, write timeout configurations, route has a header based routing, and I have to apply Kong plugins on top of these APIs. How do I do that? So if I have to do all these things, Kong has given an option called x-Kong prefix. So if you see this, for all these defaults, there is a x-Kong prefix being added for upstream defaults, for service defaults, for route defaults. But we were not very much happy to pollute the scripts, pollute the specs. So if you have an OpenAPI specifications, if you start polluting the specs with the Kong prefixes, then you cannot be using that spec for some other reason or some other work. So that is the reason Kong has provided another option called, this is make the pure OpenAPI specification and let's add patch for whatever reason, whatever you want to do. What is a patch? doing. You can do either a simple patch or a complex patch. If you want to do a simple patch, you can use it via decK commands only. You can use a selector and add a timeouts to this. Or if you want to do a complex patch with multiple parameters, you can still use this. So there is a decK patch documentation. How do we prepare these files? And that will be very easy to do this. Now, how do we achieve API ops with this? What is an API ops? So if you want to make your component CI/CD ready, you should have a set of commands you have to configure in your pipeline, right? So in that case, decK provides everything. It is giving you a command to convert your OpenAPI specification into Kong specific configurations. That is what you upload a spec file, you add a plugin to using the decK patch file, you add a tag, and then you do a diff, validate, and then sync. So all these commands, if you configure it in your pipeline, then you are API ops ready. So all are going good. Then what are the benefits we are achieving with the API ops? Is like you'll be able to fully automate your Kong configurations. And then it will be a structured approach, right? So if you have a specification, just check in the specification and add patch files. Whatever patch files you wanted to add, you will be able to add it and then configure your pipeline. So this is highly reliable one, but still, what we need more here? What we thought is still a learning curve is required. What is the learning curve here is like earlier it was 50% reduction in the Kong configurations. Like you have to develop your decK file from the scratch. Now Kong has reduced it, like if you give a specification, it can convert it into a default set of configuration. But still you have to patch a plugin, upstream, targets, you have to patch certain details. It still requires a learning curve. How do we avoid that? Like now AI agents have come into the picture. Why not we try that era in the decK? That's what we did. I cannot explain complete MCP in a single session, but I have 2-3 slides which can give you a overview of an MCP. With my understanding, I've put this. For an example, you want to type a message to the ChatGPT or Claude AI or any AI agents, plan a 3-day trip to Paris. So I want to just give an overview of how LLMs, agents, tools, and MCP came. So if I'm asking this question, plan a 3-day trip to Paris, only with the time when LLMs were available, it is able to understand my text and it is able to generate the responses for my text in a generic manner. So whoever is asking trip to Paris, it will suggest Eiffel Tower and some local restaurants you can go. But when agents have come into the picture, it is able to do memory and reasoning across my conversations. What is that? It remembers my preferences. So if I am asking this question, when agents have come, it is able to remember my context and tell me that you are a vegetarian, so it will suggest me only vegetarian restaurants. And you have a fear of heights, don't go to the top floor of the Eiffel Tower. So this became so popular among the people that how it is able to converse like a human to me. After that, it is able to only make reasoning. Okay, one of the major problem with the LLMs is it can work with only the trained data. So you people would have heard lot of criticisms when LLMs came in, like if I'm asking who is the current president of USA, it will not be able to give the right details. It starts hallucinating because it is trained with only, earlier when the LLMs were coming into the picture, 2024 data only, till that only it was trained. After that, whatever question you were asking, it is hallucinating and giving the responses. That lost the popularity of the AI. So how do we bring in that current context to this? That's where everybody started integrating the agent via tools. What is the tools? Tools is going to do, tools is going to get a real-time information and give it to the LLMs. So what everyone did, LangGraph, LangChains, all those people started writing their own tools in the way which LLM can understand only any English language. So a tool was not given any format. Everybody started writing their own tool in their own formats, but still they were able to achieve the results with LLMs. So in the same example, it is able to check the real-time flight prices, and it is able to give the ratings of the vegetarian restaurants. So this is a major shift. After that, when Anthropic came into this world, they started introducing a protocol called MCP, which is Model Context Protocol, which became a universal standard for the tool integrations. So it can action for you. The same tools were agents and the tools were integrated to action for you. Till now, they were only giving the responses for your questions, then started giving context-based answering, and now it can action for you. How it can action? Let's see that. So how do we develop this MCP server? So this is the decK command, right? OpenAPI-to-Kong specification output file. So decK MCP server is very simple. So that's why everyone started adapting this MCP server. It is having a certain format. You need to give a title for your command, give a description, and give your input parameters. If you register this in your MCP server, your things are done. That's all, how it works. So this is the sequence diagram which we have put for making it as a conversational one. So assume I am having an AI chatbot, like cursor is there. I have to just run my MCP server and give the MCP server URL to my cursor AI. Once I do that, my developer can open a cursor AI and start typing this prompt, convert this spec file in this path and sync it to the Kong. He is going to give an English language as an input, natural language. So what it is going to do, before it takes the prompt, the cursor AI will connect to the MCP server and get all the tools which is registered in the MCP server. So it gets two tools, decK OpenAPI convert and decK sync. So then the user prompt and the tools is being sent to the LLMs. So now LLM can till now operate with only the trained data sets. Now this new tool is giving the data which is available to me. Like MCP server is developed by my team, and it is able to just give the data, our custom data, to that LLM. So LLM is able to make a decision using the natural language prompts. So my question is convert spec file in the path and sync it, right? So this semantic understanding it will do, and it is telling that first call decK OpenAPI convert tool. So LLM will prepare the spec file path for me because I have given the path in the prompt. So first it calls that prompt, and then what is my MCP server doing? In the end, if you see, my MCP server is going to call that file command only. But it is all abstracted for an LLM. LLM doesn't know what is that command going to do. It is just preparing a command for you to call the tool. It prepares and gave an output. And again, there is another thing I have given, sync it to localhost 8001. So it is able to prepare a decK gateway sync command, and it is able to form my tool call here. decK sync is the tool call. It again calls the decK tool, decK gateway sync, and it is able to sync to the Kong. So this is what we were able to achieve it. But till now, we were using only decK as an MCP server. Our future enhancements will be like GitHub also has an MCP server support. After doing this configuration, sync it to the Git. So it can completely sync our configurations to the Git. And as everyone were telling that LLMs are hallucinating, they're unpredictable. But here, it cannot hallucinate. It can only call the MCP server tool. That's where MCP became so popular. And this is how we have submitted this for a hackathon project as well in Kong. We have submitted 2 projects, and one of them won an award. Maybe so. This is how the cursor AI interactions will happen. So convert the given spec and sync into the Kong. It is able to sync to the Kong successfully. But yeah, you can see the GitHub post. I think I have an announcement. You can search for decK MCP AI chatbot in internet. It is publicly available, this MCP server. And the future enhancements will be syncing to the GitHub. and also adding the plugins. So those all were becoming a bottleneck, right? Like we have to prepare a template and add a plugin. Instead, if I say add basic authentication plugin, it can still add. So our MCP server supports that. But the problem is, how do I take this to production? This may be a question in all of your mind. My intention is not to make these natural language to the production. My intention here is avoid the developer's learning curve and check into the GitHub. From the GitHub, you take that configurations via proper API ops pipeline and take it to the production. In production, we are not going to plan the same natural language here. Once we get the configurations in decK, you can check into the GitHub and you can take it all the way to production in a structured manner. Yeah, that's it from my side.